Heroes and Legends, Dynasties, the Banquron Insuran. The forces of the Centra-led Alliance, the Royal-led Alliance, and the Cibic Firbean-led Alliance had a three-way war to decide the ruler of the Banquron. Knowing that a land offensive with all these forces would mean certain destruction for all of them, they decided to use the best armadas in space between all the galaxies and their forces and launch a war to determine the fate of all of Banquron space, determine which alliance would lead the Banquron to the future. Chris knew that the Irishans and the Royals were technically advanced. The Firbean and their alliance too had stolen Irishian technology and also was using them, which led the forces of their alliance handicapped. However, unlike the other forces, the forces of the Baja and the forces and the Commonwealth Fund had God on their side as they were foreign believers, and so they prayed over their ships, their pilots, and their crew, and they sprinkled holy water as the head elder of the Baja, Jordan, led the prayers and the ceremony. While all that was going on, they were late to the party. The Irishian and the royal forces, their armadas, since Fidel was still trying to pick up for themselves, were advancing on the Firbean. The Firbean had not completed their Firbean plan, and so their ships were not equipped with Firbean powers as yet. But they were strong enough to withstand the royals. These forces continued to attack each other and bombard one another. The Cibic and the Scotian and the City Group were determined to win, as the Firbean were destined, as they thought, to rise again and claim the universe in a new light. However, the Royals and the Irishans and the technology of the Tectorans, with the help of Carclin, were not allowing them an inch. While they were going on, the forces of the Baja and the Commonwealth Fund and the Central forces, along with Marcus Centra's mad explorations of power and grandeur, and his super mech soldiers were also on board. And so they began, and it was now a three-way. The Royals and the Irishans had divided forces to deal with this new threat. The City Group also went to deal with the new threat as well. While this was going on, the Central mechs, androids, soldiers, and their mechs infiltrated the main ships of many forces and started attacking their engines. Troops inside were trying to destroy them before they could destroy their engines. It was a hot mess in space. Debris was everywhere, and it was hard to maneuver large ships like the Royals and Irishian and the Scotian and the Civic ships. However, the Baja and the Commonwealth ships were much smaller, and the Insuran-Banquron ships were even smaller than that. They were able to maneuver past all the debris in the space and were gaining an edge against the much larger armadas that they were fighting. All that was going on, mighty explosions started happening in certain of the ships. The androids were doing their damage, and the Royals were stunned, and also of the Civic were also stunned. How could this be? How could engines be blown up like this? They figured, and after some time they managed to find the culprits, but it was too late. Their ships were greatly damaged and couldn't hardly move. It's like they were dead in the water with main debris everywhere, which even made things even worse. The smaller Commonwealth and Baja ships worked together, seeing through the debris in space, and start bombarding the enemy ships until they are unmovable. And then the Central ships also made a move as well, destroying the Irishian attack their own forces, so they unable to move. The Citigroup forces gave chase to the Centra, but the Centra outmaneuvered the Citigroup, as the Centra were more technologically advanced than the Citigroup. And with that, by some holy miracle, the much smaller forces of the Central, Baja, and Commonwealth stood supreme over the Iritian, the Royals, the Cibic, the Scotia, and the Citigroup. With that, their resources were greatly damaged, and so they had no choice but to surrender. At long last, all of Banquron space was united. Chris had done the unthinkable. He united and beaten the much larger and powerful forces. However, what will Chris do now with such a large power under his ploy? Elsewhere, a similar battle was happening simultaneously. The forces of the Guardian-Clincalow were facing off against the horde of the Colinia, the Bath Health Fund Insurance, the Mannequin, the Johnson, the Nabaka, the Noah, and the Atlant. It was a 7-on-3 assault in space. It was a massive display of power and might. While all this was going on, they were determined to beat back their foes. They had heard word that Chris had won the war somehow. Dimitar was impressed. He was very close to Chris, as it was he that defeated Chris to get Chris and the Insuran-Banquron to join Omri's forces in the dimensions. He was hoping to join his friend in victory, and knowing that he had to get through this one last force in order to achieve victory. The Guardian and the Clincalow fleets were very strong and big, and they were not letting up. The forces of the Commission and the Mannequin forces and everyone else were numerous, but however, the Clincalow had a very, very long respite, and so their ships were eager and ready for action. It was a lot going on for them, and their forces were beginning to be overwhelming the much larger forces. However, Dimitar those were determined, and so Dimitar went prime form and took the space himself to end the Armadas himself. And so he swing through space, flying and dodging the ships and destroying smaller battleships that came his way. The forces of Guardian and Clincalow were stunned. Dimitar had became a new man. He knew that the weight of leadership was under his rule, and like the colonial leaders before him, they had lots to prove and always getting the short hand of the stick. Now was the time, the opportune moment for victory, and sooner or later he waded to the main ships of the Clincalow and the Guardian and speed past them, leading big holes. Breach. The deck has been breached, and then they tried to seal the deck off, and the other insurance powers began to rally, and more ships on both sides were being destroyed. The wars were getting more epic and epic. So, however, King Leonard and Leonard Clincalow did not want the entire fleet to be destroyed. The leaders of the other insurance did not want their forces to be depleted as well, and Dimitar was feeling it as well. And so he reached out and dashed to the main planet of the Guardian forces, where he met the king face to face. King Leonard made agreement that they are allied with the Colinia to end the war and finally bring peace to all insurance space, and so they should no longer be fighting one another. Dimitar then transformed out of prime form and agreed. The ships in space got word of this, and all the fighting stopped. Reconnaissance had begun to rebuild and captured and save those that have been captured, and to save those also that have been stranded in their ships. With this, the wars between the Insuran and Banquron were now over. and the alliance between the Banquron powers was solidified under Crisp, and the alliance of all Insuran was solidified under Dimitar.